In 1941, 1942, lots of Gestapo. The organization has split. The entire directorate has been arrested. One could hardly believe that it would be possible to form large units and organize all that after so many arrests and deportations. Those were terrible times.
In 1942, the territory of Ukraine was occupied by the Third Reich and its allies. A year earlier, these foreign invaders had destroyed the territorial integrity of the Ukrainian lands. Galicia was annexed to German-occupied Poland, known as the General Government. Northern Bukovina, southern Bessarabia and Transnistria was ceded to Romania, while Transcarpathia remained under Hungarian rule. The Germans established Reichskommissariat Ukraine, which comprised Volhynia, Podylia and the Dnipro region. Soviet collective farms became the basis for the Nazi state-controlled estates, which played a vital role in supplying the Third Reich citizens and army with provisions. The occupying forces conducted numerous raids against the Ukrainian people to capture workers for forced labor in Germany. The inhumane conditions of transportation resembled those of the Bolshevik deportations to Siberia, which had occurred just a few years earlier.
We were brought to Magdeburg in Germany, where we were lined up. Buyers from concentration camps and large estates were already there, and they bought us.
There came the head of the village. He had a list of those to be sent to Germany. They needed a certain number of people. He listed me and others, more and more. And my sister said, "If you're going, then I'll go with you." They took us to Germany by train, delivered to Fraustadt. When the train stopped, the buyers came and chose who they liked.
In Berlin, we were divided up. The buyers came. On this side, they attached round badges. Red, green, blue. I ended up in a concentration camp. They gave us 1 liter of turnips and 150 grams of bread a day to eat, and that was all. We were kept there. We were emaciated, weighing 35 kilograms. Bones and skin, nothing more. If you would cut off a hand and no blood would flow, there was no blood, only white mucus. People entered the yard. They were herded like cattle. Many of them died on the way or at the factory. Then they were taken by truck to a deep ravine, where the truck was backed up and the dead were dumped. The corpses rolled down, and that was that. Every day, we thought that we would be taken there.
The strict policies of the Nazi authorities further alienated the Ukrainians, who started to organize an armed resistance. In Policia and Volhynia, the first guerrilla groups and detachments of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, or OUN, commenced operations. In the spring of 1943, insurgent units united under the leadership of the OUN and named themselves the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, or UPA. Recruits were mobilized through the well-developed OUN network.
In
our village, the Germans arrested Ukrainian patriots. 7 people, and all were shot. My cousin was shot. Many educated people were shot. Then the youth division of the OUN was established. I took the oath there. Then I joined the UPA because my sister was arrested. I had to go underground.
There is an order to all OUN members. UPA units are being organized, so young men have to enlist. Among the OUN members were mostly young men and women from high schools and universities. There were a lot of intelligentsia in the organization, our patriotic young men and women. The organization was then really sizable.
Some of the older boys from our school were arrested. They were shot. We returned to school crying because they were so young. Immediately, we were no longer boys. We became adults. We saw our friends being shot. We vowed that we would defeat the Germans. A German officer came and took us to a balcony. He had an interpreter. We could see he was wearing a prosthesis because one arm was in a leather glove. He said, "The war is over. We will take you to Germany to work."
Скоро буде завершення нашої війни. І ми переможемо. Але для цього нам потрібно працювати.
Burschen, eure Arbeit in Deutschland ist auch ein Schlag gegen Kommunismus und Bolschewismus.
Хлопці, ваша праця в Німеччині буде ударом по більшевизму і комунізму.
Ihr werdet in der Rüstungsindustrie, im Landwirtschaft mit besten Maschinen arbeiten.
Ви будете працювати на оборонну індустрію.
Що таке був німецький режим?
What was the German regime? You listen and do not ask anything.
Ми розійшлися.
We dispersed, talked to each other.
Повідомили тих, котрі були в організації.
We informed those who were in the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists.
Вони сказали, нікуди не
They said, "You will not go anywhere.
підемо.
You will all join the UPA."
Ми всі згідні.
We all agreed.
І в досвіта десь година третя, і ти кричала.
At dawn at 3 a.m., we were led away.
Забрали і повели, аж потім ми знали.
Later, we found out that it was Shinkovetsky Forest.
Прийшли на пусті.
We went to the post and were met by Commander Chip.
Коли я відходив в повстанську армію,
When I joined the insurgent army,
тата було
my father had 8 children.
Я був наймолодший.
I was the youngest.
Коли я йшов,
When I was leaving for the UPA, my father told me,
синку, йдеш,
"Son, do your best not to rob anyone,
нікого не рабував,
and not to kill anyone, unless it is for your own survival, and that way you'll come back home.
А мама плакала.
And my mother cried and said, "Son, go, you will make it. You always land on your feet."
The structure of UPA was formed according to its unit's geographical bases. This resulted in such army groups as UPA North, UPA South, and UPA West. They were commanded by the Supreme Military Headquarters, whereas to maintain discipline among the troops, the military gendarmerie was established. Throughout 1943, the UPA insurgents continued receiving training, while officer schools were also established. These were run by the Ukrainians who had previously served in either the Polish, German or Soviet armies, or had taken part in defending Carpatho-Ukraine's independence in 1939.
Деякі бараки будувалися.
Some barracks were built, but most guys lived in tents. There were no fewer than 600 people. The camp was supervised by an insurgent from Transcarpathia. His alias was Lepay. The discipline was strict. We woke at 6 a.m., performed our physical drills. Then we washed up, prayed, ate breakfast, and then had activities till the afternoon.
There were nursing courses. We were trained by 3 doctors. Among the trainers was a military, because we were taught both medicine and military fundamentals. We learned how to shoot and disassemble weapons. The training was at a high level. Everything was at a high level. We learned about weapons. Being in the underground without guns was impossible. So there was special training for girls: pistols, handguns and grenades. I personally had what we called PPS. I even have a picture of myself taken in a Bolshevik uniform. It fit me well. I wore it when necessary, otherwise I wore civilian clothes. I was sent for training in Kukuriki, a village in Kovel. There I learned to be a scout, an intelligence agent. A scout had to be able to swim well, shoot, dance, sing, and play at least one musical instrument. It was very demanding. Things we never ever thought about. I even had to kiss a German, no matter how much I hated him.
The most important thing was to be able to disassemble and clean a weapon, and learn to aim and shoot properly. We learned how to ambush advancing troops, while others provided cover.
To protect the fighters and their families, the UPA adopted the OUN's methods of secrecy. This resulted in each recruit receiving an insurgent alias.
Псевдо кожен вибрав собі.
Each of it could choose his own alias. I had heard of the Cossack Mucha. I told my commanding officer, "I will be Mucha." "Very well, my friend. You will be Mucha," he said. Others were Osa, Jmil. Everyone could pick an alias that he liked best. They were never written down. Everyone knew that I was Mucha. When speaking among ourselves, we used friend. There was no comrade, sir. There was friend Mucha, friend Jmil, friend commander.
І брали хлопців до Орлика.
And boys were recruited to Orlik Company.
Старик.
And there was this old man, Kuziv Mikola.
Та й приходять. Така от, як
He was asked, "How shall we call you?"
А він каже, Як-небудь.
And he says, whatever.
І так йому дали.
And so we gave him
Як-небудь.
whatever.
The ranks of the UPA were reinforced by thousands of volunteers. Companies and units were organized on the basis of a regular army. Among the insurgents, strict discipline prevailed. Desertion was punishable by death. Leaving one's company without permission, falling asleep while on guard, or consuming alcohol resulted in physical punishment.
Не вільно було відлучатися.
You could not be absent from the unit.
Розумієте?
It wasn't allowed. And that's it.
Мусив бути в відділі,
You had to be with the unit at every step,
тому що рано
because every morning there was an assembly.
збірка.
The discipline was strict, as it is in the army.
Military discipline helped the insurgents to engage in large-scale attacks. The UPA fighters sabotaged the Eastern Front supply lines, which destabilized the Germans' logistical support system. Throughout 1943, the insurgents took control of numerous villages in Volhynia, Polysia, and Galicia.
When we took control of these territories, the Germans were in Vishnevets, Kremenets, Lutsk. All the windows were bricked up halfway, with only holes for shooting, while below were mounds of earth. They were so scared. Everything was covered with sandbags. There was no communication. From Vishnevets to Kremenets was 24 kilometers. In one night, all the telegraph lines were cut, and all the bridges dismantled. Men of the village could cross the bigger rivers or streams by horse, but cars or trucks got stuck. Everything had to be dismantled.
Коли тільки наші повстанці зайняли Колки,
As soon as our insurgents seized Kolki,
відразу почали
they immediately began to set up schools, cafeterias mostly, laundries.
Колківська республіка – це просто можна так назвати.
Kolkivska Republic was, so to speak, a self-defense unit of youth.
Молодих юнаків, дівчат.
So that they wouldn't be deported to Germany and have something of their own.
Як УПА стало, то вже
When the UPA took control of the territories, the boys and girls were not given to Germany. No one was taken. No cows were given to the Germans. Nothing was given. The Germans were afraid to enter the village.
Villages liberated from the Germans became Ukrainian rebel republics. Civil administration, schools, clinics, and even local businesses were formed. The self-organization of Ukrainians was a unique phenomenon during World War II.
On Sunday, we went to church, piling our weapons in the yard. People were curious. They asked us about everything. Every village had its own stanitsa head. It was an organizational OUN network, the stanitsa head and the village head. He was informed. The company will come. You have to ask the villagers to provide lodging and food. The women cooked, fed us, cried. Some even fell in love. It was our youth.
Support from the Ukrainian population was critical to UPA. The insurgents could rely on the locals not only to deliver their messages, but also to provide them with shelter and food.
The village helped very nicely. If not for the villagers, the insurgents wouldn't have survived because there would have been no supplies.
We gave them bread, baked for them, gave clothes, washed clothes, prepared food. I remember when my brother Vasil was with the insurgents, some women and I used to bring food for them. I was 14 years old at the time. I used to take food somewhere to Khymych, and I never thought I should be afraid. I wasn't afraid of anything. Such was my age.
People were treated well. We were staying in Zelena in the mountains. It was interesting. An older woman smoked her pipe, and the young one cigarettes. The girl was only 16 and pretty. I sang there the whole night. In the morning, I went to the mother and kissed her hand and said, "Mother." I'm going to the promised land. I doubt I shall return, but if I do, I'd like to become your son-in-law. She was so moved by my words that she said to me, "Son, if you are defeated, come back here. I have a good bunker. I'll hide you."
In the summer of 1943, the Nazis conducted a series of large-scale anti-insurgent operations. Very soon these actions turned punitive, the purpose of which to destroy the local population. The Germans deployed Waffen-SS units, tanks and aircraft to the region. Numerous villages were burned in Volhynia. In response, the UPA commanders issued detailed guidelines on the structure of self-defense. In villages, strongholds were set up. One of them was a monastery in the village of Zahoriv in Volhynia. In early September 1943, a battle between the UPA fighters and the German punitive units broke out.
Arhip Kalish says, "Today we'll be playing music near the monastery." The people, neighbors ask, "What kind of?" "You'll hear. They'll be beating the Banderites."
The grandmother was the first to wake up. She said, "Get up, because cars are coming." It was the Germans. They exited the cars and walked in a line. We could hear when the insurgents fired. They were saving cartridges.
One fellow got up to the choir and started shooting from a machine gun. The Germans couldn't do much. They were losing people. Then they set the village on fire. The entire line burned. The Germans called for air support. A bomber came and dropped one bomb on the monastery, and one more right next to the monastery.
The Germans crawled up to the walls and started throwing grenades through the windows.
The machine gunner was dragged like you would drag some cattle.
They were laid in a row. Nobody surrendered to them alive. They were all young lads.
Both Nazi Germany and the USSR conducted campaigns to discredit the insurgents. Propaganda leaflets were dropped on the Ukrainian villages. The Nazis portrayed UPA as a pro-Soviet movement, while the Soviet propaganda attempted to brand them as Nazi collaborators. At the same time, UPA also disseminated propaganda among the German and Soviet troops. The purpose of this campaign was to convince the soldiers of Eastern European and Asian descent to join the insurgents under the slogan, "Freedom to peoples, freedom to man." This policy proved to be quite successful. In August 1943, many soldiers from the non-German Wehrmacht divisions joined the UPA. Small units of Azerbaijanis, Armenians, Georgians, Lithuanians, Uzbeks and Kazakhs were created.
In Khymych company were Uzbeks, Italians, Georgians.
От якраз в тій сотні Стах,
In Stach company was a Kazakh machine gunner.
казах. Як він попав туди?
How did he end up there? It was a Russian liberation army,
Руська освободительна армія. І він
and he was with them.
Він
He escaped after he realized it made no sense and joined the UPA.
Піймали полоненого. Хто такий? Звідки? Німецький дезертир.
And he stayed with us. His alias was Kolya.
The UPA Central Command came to the conclusion that there was a dire need to establish a non-partisan executive body to unite people with different political views. This resulted in the formation of the Ukrainian Supreme Liberation Council, or USLC. In the summer of 1944, a secret meeting was held near Sambir. During this meeting, the platform and universal of the USLC and the UPA Oath of Allegiance were adopted. The Liberation Council became the Ukrainian insurgents' authorized representative, their revolutionary government and parliament. At the beginning of 1944, the Red Army gained control of the majority of Ukrainian lands. As a result, the UPA insurgents found themselves fighting invaders on both sides of the front. Armed with 45mm cannons, UPA South units waged bloody battles against the NKVD internal security troops. At the same time, more than 30,000 insurgents continued operating on the German side of the front. They killed hundreds of Hitler's troops during numerous clashes.
Бій відбувся у липні.
The battle took place in July 1944.
Коли ми приїхали до Сокіля, було
When we got to Sokil, we heard that the Germans were approaching.
і нам дано був приказ
We received an order to load the cargo onto the horses.
на коні. На конях ми
We drove the horses with the cargo to Mount Lopata.
Лопату. І тут зараз вже
And there, a lot of Germans were gathering.
їх
40 vehicles were on the move. Then the shootout began. The battle seethed. And when the front ranks of Germans fell, the insurgents ran and took away all the weapons. They already had what was needed to kill them. That was the moment. The boys fought like eagles. It was inspiring. It was our strength. Sheer will fought, not the weapons.
UPA West forces also had to battle Nazi Germany's allies, including the Hungarian First Army, which was positioned between Dolina and Tovmach. Fully aware of the absurdity of engaging the UPA units in the wake of a large-scale Soviet offensive, the Hungarian command made a deal with the insurgent leaders. As a result, the UPA agreed to let the Hungarian army through without a fight in exchange for arms, medicine, and uniforms.
We reached an agreement with the Hungarians that we would not fight one another. The agreement also stipulated that they would have to take care of our wounded in their hospitals. I was given an order by the commander of our battalion to take 16 wounded men to the Hungarian hospital. There were 60 troops in my squadron. I gathered them and passed along the order.
Є наказ, аби відправити ранених і вертатись назад. А як не буде можливості, то йти разом з мадярами на захід. Хто намірений йти назад через лінію фронту додому, крок вперед!
Everyone stepped forward together. No one remained.
We were crossing the front line in the Carpathians. It was very difficult, because the Germans defeated the Bolsheviks, and then the Bolsheviks defeated the Germans. All those remains of the army were walking through the Carpathians. We followed them close by. We gained a lot of weapons then.
During combat in the Carpathian Mountains, Ukrainian soldiers in the Soviet army started deserting their units and joining the UPA.
And one Russian says, "Boys, we are heading to the front line. At nighttime, one can see a lot of flashes. The Germans are firing." At that time, Galicians from other villages were trying to stick together, having previously agreed that we would leave the Soviet ranks at nighttime. We were going to escape. 12 to 13 of our men did. A guy who had previously served in the Polish armed forces was in charge. He told us to take firearms. That's how we banded together and left the unit. Where did we go? We didn't know. We knew we had to go to the forest. We hoped the UPA fighters would spot us and then take us in. But this didn't happen. Nobody found us. We wandered around the forest all day. We were very hungry. Then we split into groups of 2 or 3. I stayed with the one guy who said, "My brother has established contact. We had to get to a village in the direction of Peremyshl. Then we will be able to join the UPA." And that's what happened.
In the autumn of 1944, the territory of Ukraine was completely occupied by Soviet forces, with the front moving farther west. The communist regime returned to Volhynia and Galicia. The local population still remembered the atrocities committed by the communists 5 years earlier and looked upon the Soviets as oppressors rather than liberators.
Those Bolsheviks were like a swarm of locusts. They even broke the entrance doors when people locked themselves in. They kicked us out of our house. They took everything away from us. Whoever had livestock or anything like that had to pay such high taxes that it made them groan with anguish. Our young men and women were taken to the barn for questioning. Once they got just ordinary village boys, and they were tortured and tormented there so that they would say something about the insurgents. And they arrested us, took us to the village. There were 4 of us, and in the village they took 10 more people. Young and old, whoever they could find. At that time everyone was fleeing to the forest. Both the old and the young fled. So they called me, not to a room, but to a hut. One of them spoke to me kindly, asking questions.
Так, значить, гражданка, утверждаєте, в лісі були, але нікого не бачили. На зв'язок з бандою не виходили? Добре. Так і запишемо.
And then the other rushed in, grabbed an iron poker, and hit me on the thighs.
Панове, до світлини.
Увага!
As of late 1944, the UPA numbered about 40,000, and its units were well armed, and even had cannons and mortars.
There were a lot of them, those commanders, captains. And I saw so many tents, like the stars at night. There were really, really lots of them. The unit marched past my house. In the morning we could see that the field was more like a road, barren land, since so many had treaded on it.
Gamaliel was an old man. He was short with a beard. And this man, rather than rest in his warm home, led a company. He had the weapons, anti-tank guns, machine guns, the heaviest weapons.
To tame the insurgents, the Soviet government dispatched NKVD forces to western Ukraine. Large-scale battles with insurgents took place in remote areas of the Carpathians. In early 1945, an important base for the UPA was the Kosmatska Republic.
Таким образом, 5 оперативных групп сосредоточены в Ебуновском районе.
Товарищ подполковник, разрешите доложить?
Докладывай.
По нашим данным установлено, что в районе Космача сконцентрирована банда УПА, состоящая из курения Скубы, Орлыка, Нечосы. Ожидается подход курения Резуна.
Где ваша опергруппа? Где наша?
Вблизи Космача ни одной. Наша группа находится здесь, здесь и вот здесь.
За операцию головой ответишь. Сам поведу.
Наша сотня отримала приказ.
Our company received an order to go to the Kolomia-Kosmach road, which we did.
Знаєте, ми на кінець кінців знайшли таку, розумієте, такий рельєф.
We found an area where each of the 4 units of the company could spread out.
Всі 4 чоти, у нас у сотні було 4 чоти. Понад річку дорога, а з річки
A road stretched over the river,
хребет гір.
and there were mountain ridges on both sides,
Тут поворот,
and then a turn and a bridge. We disassembled the bridge.
Був глибокий сніг.
The snow was very deep, and we were all well camouflaged. Not until the last second when we opened fire did the Bolsheviks know that someone was waiting for them. I remember it very well. The reconnaissance unit passed by, bypassed all sides. Nobody touched them. So the next day they rode by boldly. The Bolsheviks did not expect to find the bridge missing. The first vehicle almost went over the edge. Behind it, the second, third, fourth, and on and on. We waited until the last vehicles caught up so as not to break up the column, so that the last vehicles would not attack us from the rear. We waited for the last vehicle. The enemy was in the bag, surrounded. 22 machine guns, a regimental mortar, a 22mm armor-piercing gun was at our disposal. I gave the command, fire. Who was there? What unit was it? How many were killed? No one knew for sure. There were so many of them, like ants in an anthill.
Після цього бою, як я йшов тут у Рушор,
As I walked along the road after the battle in Rushor, it was hard not to notice that the road was flooded in blood.
The Bolsheviks attacked from all sides because the Banderite capital was here. They called it the capital because here we had the entire insurgent corps. The village was in a valley. The road was practically impassable.
I immediately saw that it was not the insurgents. I continued to walk, pretending I hadn't noticed them. They immediately asked, "Where are the Banderites?" I truly did not hide anything. I said they're in the mountains. What sort of weapons do they have? I said they have some weapons. I do not know what they are called. One on wheels. With a long tube. They say to each other, "What is it? An anti-aircraft gun?"
And so, when the Bolsheviks came, they started asking questions. But there was not much to say. Have they been here? Yes, they have. What were they doing? They were eating. What did they want? Their own state. The way they beat me, tortured me, I lack the words to describe it. But God helped me endure everything, because I begged and I prayed, "Lord, help me remain sane and not give away my people."
Attempting to avoid bad publicity, the Soviet command decided not to engage the insurgents in large-scale operations, preferring to blockade villages instead.
The Bolsheviks arrived. The Red Broom came. A battalion was in each village. In the morning, they inspected and checked everyone. The raids were like this. They came, encircled a hill, and searched. But as a rule, people knew about it. They had supporters among the Bolsheviks who informed them. They only succeeded in capturing a few insurgents.
Their father died in the Austrian War, leaving the mother with 2 children, a son and a little girl. There was a raid, and the Bolsheviks found that young boy in the house. They took him and brutally beat him black and blue. And in another place, they came when a woman was in labor, and they caught and burned her husband alive. So what could people do?
A piece of iron was placed on each hill. As soon as the car started to head in the direction of the village, people began hitting the pieces of iron. It rang and was passed on. By the time the car entered the village, the people had fled into the forest, as they once did from the Tatars.
The NKVD began setting up a network of agents and informants in the villages. Their assignment was to infiltrate the underground movement, spread misinformation, and incite interethnic hatred.
The main thing I want to tell you, there was Bolshevik agents in every insurgent unit. It was a tragedy. Secret informers. They were insurgents who gave in. They were our people who couldn't stand the torture. They beat them. These were our people, secret informers. Later, other people became informers, but they did this for money. The Bolsheviks found a way to buy the villagers out.
They say you can make a cross and a spade from the same wood. And that's how it was in the family. One was a patriot, and the other collaborated with the Bolsheviks. There were all kinds of people. You know how it is. Some liked the insurgents, others squealed on them, all kinds. There were a lot of those who squealed. In our village, there were a number of informers.
In these difficult circumstances, the insurgents started using a different tactic, conducting propaganda raids on the territories of the neighboring countries.
Я дістав приказ
I received an order from the Bukovina regional commander
зробити рейд
to conduct a raid on the whole territory of Bukovina, from the Carpathians to Bessarabia and back.
оперативно-пропагандивний. Що
Propaganda raids, holding demonstrations in villages.
з мітингами. По дорозі, де були, то там у них ще були ті. Були ті румунські.
On the way were Romanian police stations, which we destroyed.
Зібрали людей.
We gathered people for the meetings and explained to them who we were and what we wanted.
Проходилися марші,
There were raids. It was not so easy.
та то вночі треба було йти.
At night, we had to go 20, 30 kilometers through the woods.
Кілометрів навіть, знаєте, заходити.
We had to go to various villages so that people saw us, knew that we were fighting for Ukraine, that we had weapons.
Ми мали йти за границю.
Our company had to go abroad to Czechoslovakia.
Ще був такий момент,
We had to break through somewhere. We could not sit still. We found a place to stay.
І прийшли большевики в село.
The Bolsheviks came to the village and began to search. Shooting began. I could feel something exploding under my feet. Everything turned black. I lost consciousness. Then I opened my eyes and was shivering. The guys were firing. My legs felt numb. I asked them to finish me off. It hurt so much. They said, "Be patient, just a little more."
Due to the material superiority of the enemy, UPA reorganized its forces, dividing them into smaller units. This strategic move enabled the insurgents to continue their resistance despite the total blockade.
Але в 46-му році осінню
In the fall of 1946, General Roman Shukhevich's lieutenant came to the Kolomea area.
у Коломийську округу зібрав нас і сказав: "Хлопці,
He said to us, "Boys, the time of large-scale operations has come to an end.
заходимо
From now on, we have to lay low.
завданням нашим
Our objective is to conserve our manpower
живу силу, якнайдовше
and continue our resistance for as long as possible.
показати перед світом,
We have to show the world who we are and who our enemies are."
By 1945, UPA South had ceased to exist. The following year, UPA North was completely annihilated. Only the units of Havelya and Sian, military districts of UPA West, were able to continue the fight.
Стою я в лісі самотою, бачу своє рідне село, в ріднім селі чути співають, а в мене серденько звело. В ріднім селі чути співають, а в мене серденько звело. Давно за північ та не спиться, снуються думи в голові, чи доживу країну вільну не в ярмі, чи доживу я, чи побачу країну вільну не в ярмі. Ой, у лісі на полянці стояли повстанці, посходились до потічка вмиватися вранці, посходились до потічка вмиватися вранці. Одні вже ся повмивали, другі ще втирались. Більшовицького нападу та й не сподівались. Більшовицького нападу